Is there even such a thing as a just war? This week I posted a couple quotes from a couple different religious leaders in Russia. Let me read them for you here. First one is from an imam. Ask Allah for protection from the evil of tyrants. Don't accept draft notices. If you take them, rip them apart. Better to be in prison than to kill innocent people. Leave the country. If you find yourself drafted, surrender. And then this from the Patriarch in Moscow, the head of the Russian Orthodox Church. Go bravely to fulfill your military duty. Remember that if you die for your country, you will be with God in his kingdom, glory, and eternal life. And the comment I posted along with this was, sometimes you have to reject Christianity in order to follow the Christ. I fully believe that Christ calls us to the way of nonviolence, the way of peace in the world. And sometimes, even when the apparatus of Christianity is calling you to war, to actually follow Christ, you have to reject that. However, there is a concept called just war theory within the Christian tradition. Now, it goes way back in history to Augustine. Now, Augustine doesn't lay out criteria for what a just war would be, but he does go on to suggest that remaining passive in the face of violence against an innocent, it in itself would be evil. He says defense of oneself or one's loved ones or someone who is powerless. This is in itself a good, something that a Christian must do. Thomas Aquinas, centuries later, goes a bit farther. He actually lays out some criteria for a just war. He says that first, the war must be waged on the command of a rightful sovereign. Second, the war needs to be waged for a just cause on account of some wrong or an attack that has been committed. And finally, that warriors must have the right intent, namely to promote good and to avoid evil. They must be trying to protect someone, not just being involved in a war because they want to be violent. And then in the 1992 Catechism of the Catholic Church, things were taken even farther. This time there are 4 criteria for just war. The damage inflicted by the aggressor must be lasting, grave, and certain. All other means of putting an end must have been shown to be impractical or ineffective. There must be serious prospects of success. And the use of arms must not produce evils and disorders graver than the evil that is trying to be eliminated. So you can see there's attempts here to say that, yes, any violence, any war is never a good thing, but maybe it is the lesser of 2 evils. And sometimes we have to wade into evil ourselves in order to prevent a graver, a more certain, a more deadly evil in the world. Now, as someone who strives to follow the way of peace and tries, if at all possible, to take a pacifist stance in the world, I recognize a couple things. First, that this is a very difficult situation and that Christians of a good moral character and Christians of deep commitment have different views on these topics. I am not here to judge anyone or to impose my views on anyone. In fact, I actually think that's part of being a pacifist in the world, is not trying to impose your perspective on anyone else, simply offering it out there for others to take or leave. But second, I do also think we should make a distinction here between what Augustine calls a passive response to evil and a pacifistic response to evil. Being a pacifist is not saying that you should passively allow evil to continue in the world. In fact, many pacifists, including Jesus, have put themselves on the line to prevent evil, allowing themselves to be harmed, putting themselves in the way of harm to protect someone who is powerless in a situation. To be a pacifist is not to be passive. It is to actively oppose evil with nonviolence, even to the point of allowing yourself to be harmed or to take on the violence that is directed towards someone who can't defend themselves. So I think that's important to be aware of. But I posted these 2 quotes from these 2 religious leaders, and someone pointed out to me, hey, there is a reason for just war, and those who serve in the military are doing that in good conscience. Therefore, we should not judge those who are drafted into war, those who fight on behalf of their country. We should only judge those generals and those leaders who send people off to war. But this is the whole problem with just war theory, is it comes to the practical life of a Christ follower. because it allows you to say, just as this person did, that we should both criticize the generals and the political leaders like we can in Russia as they've engaged in a war of aggression, but we can never criticize those people who are just following orders because they are soldiers and they are taking up the cause of defending their country and doing what they are told to do. That's not just war theory. Just war theory says that the war must be legitimate, that the person entering the war must have good cause, that the war must be in defense of someone, not for aggression. This requires that every single soldier in every single army not simply follow orders, but actually be a theologian who is weighing these considerations at every possible moment. And that's not how armies work. Armies work because generals make decisions when they are told to by politicians, and those orders are passed down to soldiers, and soldiers are expected to do their duty. Now, the Christ follower is called to make a theological decision at every time violence presents itself as an option. And again, in this situation, even if you follow just war theory, even if you believe there are times it is justified, the Imam is right. This is a war of aggression, and therefore every soldier is now called to make a theological calculation to decide that they should abandon their post. It is better to go to prison than it is to kill an innocent, even if your superiors tell you it is the right thing. Just war theory falls apart when it is held up against our modern army systems. We are asking every person, every soldier, every infantryman to commander to general to become a theologian that is making the calculation, is this evil thing that I'm about to do a lesser evil than what I am preventing? And again, I'm sympathetic to that as a conceptual framework for war, and I'm not here to judge the soldier or the police person or anyone who has different convictions than I do. But understand that just war theory is not compatible with what you sign up with when you become a soldier today. Just war theory is calling you to be deeply theological in all of your choices, even when that comes to following orders. And once again, we are back to where I started, to suggest that sometimes to follow the Christ, we must reject the apparatus that surrounds our faith. Be that military commands, be that commands from our religious leaders that tell us to follow in our nationalistic patterns. Sometimes to follow Jesus means that you only follow Jesus, not Christianity, not nation, not just war theory, but you follow the way of peace in the world.